All right, let's talk about a word we hear all the time, the cloud. But we're not just going to talk about it in general terms. We're going to look at it through a really critical lens, healthcare. We're going to break down what the cloud actually is and why it's becoming, well, the new backbone of health information technology.
So here's how we're going to do it. First, we'll get into the huge data problem that hospitals are facing right now. Then, we'll decode what makes the cloud, the cloud. After that, we'll use a surprisingly useful and kind of fun pizza as a service model to make sense of the options. We'll look at where the data actually lives, and finally, we'll weigh the pros and cons for any healthcare organization thinking about this.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, the fundamental problem. Why are we even having this conversation in medicine? Well, it all comes down to one massive challenge that pretty much every modern hospital is dealing with.
I mean, just think about the sheer scale of it. A single hospital is dealing with a constant flood of data. We're talking electronic health records, gigantic MRI and CT scan files, and then you've got real-time data streaming from every single bedside monitor. So the big question is, how on earth do you manage all of that, keep it totally secure, and not go broke doing it? This is the exact dilemma the cloud is designed to solve.
So to really understand how the cloud pulls this off, we have to get a little more specific. Let's decode the actual DNA of the cloud and figure out what makes it different from just, storing things online.
At its heart, cloud computing is a really simple idea. Instead of having a huge server room humming away in the hospital basement, you're basically accessing all those IT resources, computing power, storage, software, you name it, over the internet. The key here is that it's on demand. You get what you need right when you need it, and you only pay for what you actually use.
But here's the thing. Not just any online service gets to call itself the cloud. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology says it has to have these 5 essential traits. So for a hospital, this means a research team can fire up a super powerful server whenever they want. A doctor can pull up patient records securely from their tablet. And the system can instantly scale up to handle a huge surge in telehealth calls, all while you're only paying for exactly what was used.
Okay, so now let's see how these ideas come together to create different kinds of cloud services. And to make this super clear, we are going to use a simple and, frankly, pretty delicious analogy.
The source material for this whole explainer gives us this fantastic metaphor. Thinking about cloud services like you think about ordering a pizza is an amazing way to understand a really crucial concept. Who is responsible for what?
So check this out. On the far left, you've got on-premises. That's like making a pizza totally from scratch at home. You handle the dough, the oven, the drinks, the table, everything. Now, as we move to the right, watch what happens. Take and bake is next. Someone else handles the drinks and table, but you still got to provide the oven. With pizza delivery, they even handle the oven. And then all the way on the right, dine out. That's full service. The restaurant takes care of the whole shebang.
Okay, now let's map this directly to health IT. On-premises is your hospital's very own data center. You manage everything. With infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, the vendor manages the basic servers and networking. That's the drinks and table. Move over to platform as a service, PaaS, and they're also managing the operating system. That's the oven. And finally, software as a service, SaaS, the vendor handles everything, right up to the EHR software itself. You're just dining out.
So let's make this real. That web-based EHR system your clinic uses, that's a classic example of SaaS. What if you're building a brand new, custom telehealth app for your health system? You'd probably build that on a PaaS platform. And what about a massive genomics research project that needs incredible computing power, but only for a few months? That is the perfect job for renting raw infrastructure with IaaS.
So now we get the different service models. But where does all this stuff actually live? Well, that brings us to a really critical choice. Is it going to be a public cloud, a private one, or some kind of hybrid of the two?
Okay, the 2 main flavors are public and private. Think of a public cloud like an apartment building. You share the overall building with other tenants. It's really cost-effective. A private cloud, on the other hand, is like your own private house with a big fence around it. The whole thing is dedicated just to you, which gives you absolute control. Something that's obviously critical when we're talking about sensitive patient data. Our source material uses this example of a company needing to protect its special data. For a hospital, just swap out proprietary data for protected health information, and you immediately get the appeal, right? A private cloud gives you that fortress-level security and control.
But things are rarely that black and white, are they? Let's take a more realistic scenario from our source, Allied Health. They need everyday, cost-effective stuff like email, but they also have to protect patient data under super strict HIPAA rules.
A public cloud is great for the email, but it's a total non-starter for the patient records. So what do you do?
And this dilemma sets up the perfect solution, the hybrid cloud. It is, truly, the best of both worlds. The health system can run its email and other standard apps on the cheaper public cloud while keeping all its sensitive patient data locked down tight in a private cloud. And the two can talk to each other seamlessly. This has become a really powerful and popular strategy in health IT.
All right, last section. Let's get into the strategic trade-offs. Because the cloud offers incredible promise for healthcare, but it also comes with some very real perils that every single organization has to think about.
So the promise of the cloud for healthcare really boils down to 3 huge benefits. First, way lower costs up front. You don't have to build and maintain your own expensive data center. Second, you get flexible capacity that can grow or shrink whenever you need it to. And third, redundancy. The big cloud providers have data centers all over the place, so if a hurricane hits one location, a hospital's critical systems can just switch over and keep running from another one.
Let's just focus on that flexibility for a second, what we call elasticity, because this is an absolute game changer. It means a health system can try out a new telehealth service without having to wait 6 months to buy and install new servers. If patients love it, you scale up instantly. If it's a dud, you just scale back down. No wasted money, no crazy long delays.
But of course, there's another side to this coin. There are perils. Cloud pricing can get really complicated and lead to some nasty surprise bills. Security is a massive, massive concern. You are handing over your most sensitive patient data to someone else. And finally, there's a big strategic risk called vendor lock-in.
The Sahara Inc. story from our source is the perfect example of this. They got so tangled up with their cloud provider that it became almost impossible, both technically and financially, to ever leave. In healthcare, this is a nightmare scenario. It can mean being trapped with a terrible EHR vendor with no easy way to move to something better for your patients and clinicians.
So ultimately, for anyone working in health IT, the message has to be crystal clear. Moving to the cloud is not just a tech decision. It is a massive strategic one. It gives you incredible power, but every single choice you make has to be filtered through the non-negotiables: security, HIPAA compliance, and the one thing healthcare cannot survive without: patient trust.
And that leaves us with one final and really important question for the future. We're moving into a world of smart pacemakers, intelligent hospital beds, remote patient monitors, a massive Internet of Things, all streaming data constantly. So, is the cloud the essential key to making this connected, healthier future a reality? Or could it become healthcare's single greatest point of vulnerability? That's the challenge we're all facing.